Hi, my name is Cassandra Dinkelman and I'm the Education Support Officer at Down Syndrome Queensland. Thank you for joining me. Today's webinar is Reading Our Way, an information session. If you have any questions, simply email me edsupport@downsyndromeqld.org.au or phone the office 3356 6655. Thank you. Enjoy. Today's webinar will be providing a general overview and information about Reading Our Way kits, which includes research. We have Facebook and Instagram accounts as well as YouTube accounts, both for Reading Our Way and for Down Syndrome Queensland. So if you'd like ideas or information further to this webinar, you can also have a look in these spaces. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the First Nations people as traditional custodians of the land that we're on today. We acknowledge and pay our respects to all elders, past, present, and emerging. Research. What do we know about children with Down syndrome? We know that reading is a strength for children with Down syndrome due to their visual memory skills. 65% of the population, which includes those with Down syndrome, are visual learners or have good visual memory skills. This means that supporting information visually can help retain information, not just for those with Down syndrome. We know that children introduced to literacy in preschool years reach the highest levels of achievement throughout life, and we know that people with Down syndrome make use of their good visual memory skills to read, but are slower at using phonics. Visual information can be processed more quickly and with more success than verbal information. So what that means is that learning from listening is difficult, but learning from looking is much easier, which is why we encourage the use of visuals wherever possible. Despite difficulties with verbal short-term memory, visual memory is identified as a relative strength for students with Down syndrome. A student is likely to remember something that they have seen much longer than something they have heard. So the research tells us that a sight word approach to reading is frequently recommended. Research suggests that exposure to literacy activities can improve spoken language skills, memory, improved speech, articulation, and grammar. So by using a visual reading program, 70% of individuals with Down syndrome achieve functional levels of literacy by the time they reach adulthood. It might take them a little longer to achieve, but this is possible. So the notion of a plateau or point in which reading development ceases for a person with Down syndrome is a myth. There's no evidence of a glass ceiling on learning, and people with Down syndrome continue to learn well into their adult life. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. We're certainly moving more towards that, aren't we? Visually. So characteristics of Down syndrome that affect reading. Students have an intellectual impairment, which means that retaining knowledge is difficult for them. They have difficulties with verbal short-term memory, limited auditory processing capacity, so it takes longer to process the auditory information than visual information, which is why we're encouraging that visual approach. There are vision difficulties, so 100% of people with Down syndrome have visual acuity, which means that the finer details and sharp contrasts are lacking, even if they wear properly fitting glasses, which in fact not all people with Down syndrome require. And hearing impairments. So because they have small eustachian tubes, it is harder for them to be able to hear effectively. The verbal capacity of a student with Down syndrome is going to affect their ability to read. So why do we teach reading besides the fact that it's a part of the curriculum? It develops a range of skill and speech and language skills. Reading might form a pathway to oral language development where children learn to read words which then form part of their expressive language. Improvement in spoken language skills such as clarity of speech, speech intelligibility, and for all children, an improved vocabulary. It helps to improve memory and develops an understanding of literacy skills, which would include grammar, language structure, such as sentences, phonetics, writing skills. When? So when do we teach reading skills? The earlier children start reading, the greater the impact on their speech and language development, as well as their memory. It's never too late to start. We have adults who are in our CEP program and even outside the CEP program who are starting to learn as adults how to read. Learning can continue into adolescence, and this may in fact be the optimal time for learning to occur, because we're doing this through activities that are meaningful to the person, to the participant, and have a purposeful outcome. They need to be able to make connections between their personal lives and the literacy activities that they're engaged in. So, for example, they're wanting to learn how to cook, they can be following a recipe. Texts and tasks are chosen around the person's interests, which helps them to remain highly motivated, and the outcomes that are evident. The outcomes that are evident to the students. So as a result, their motivation is high. They can see that there's a purpose to learning to read, so they are interested in reading. And making it meaningful to the individual is always going to be the most effective way. So what should we do in terms of beginning reading? This is the order that we would recommend using. The progression is based on strengths and learning style of students with Down syndrome. It builds a firm foundation which will in turn develop a love of reading and a sense of accomplishment. So we start with personally significant words such as family names, friends' names, pets, favourite foods, places, sports, etc., in conjunction with pictures. Then we use words that motivate and engage the student, words that they've heard already, words that they are already using in their speech. So, for example, some of my son's earliest words were run, stop, and faster, because we were in a part of a running group and he enjoyed being able to command what was going on, either with myself or other people. Then we move on to high frequency words and then follow on with unknown words. So Colligan says that skilled readers require the ability to recall memorized words and the ability to apply letter sound rules to decode unknown words. So when we do, when do we incorporate phonics? Phonics is important, but it's covered at a later stage. So once the students have the ability to recall memorized words, then you would consider adding in the phonics. What does the approach look like? How do we begin reading? So step one is the whole word approach that introduces words to the student as whole units, where the student recognises the whole word by sight without analysis of the parts that make up the word. No phonics, no decoding. It's used for high frequency words that are unable to be decoded. Those tricky words such as like, was, and were. It's an approach that research shows to be successful with visual learners. And this is focusing on strength rather than weaknesses. And in the beginning, that's errorless learning, which means that the student is prompted to make the correct response immediately. The prompt is then slowly faded, which encourages accuracy with the least amount of errors or frustration. Helps that student to celebrate their success as well. So let's get into the details of Reading Our Way. The program was developed by Down Syndrome Queensland with 5 levels. It's a visual approach to literacy, teaching literacy, and it's based on research around literacy development for individuals with Down syndrome, which has most commonly been researched by Sue Buckley. At the end of the webinar, we have included a list of references for you to look at, but in short, Reading Our Way uses the matching, choosing, naming process. It's a whole word approach, and it promotes the importance of teaching reading in a variety of contexts using fun, engaging activities and personalised resources. This only makes up part of the reading that you would do in class or with your child at home. You'd still need to include areas such as comprehension and phonics, but it's a great tool for establishing confidence in reading. And I can certainly see a difference in my son's confidence and skills and speech for that matter. And now for a video of a teacher's perspective of using Reading Our Way in her classroom.
So when Jacob came to me at the start of the year, he was, quite below year level in reading, and I was just teaching him reading like any other child. But having then gone to the conference and purchased the program, my whole way of teaching him has changed, and as a result, he has just taken off with his reading, benchmarking him at levels way above where I thought that he would be. He's jumped a good 5 or 6 levels since we have purchased the program. His recognition of those words in environmental text is happening as well. He's pointing out words, he's spelling words that otherwise he would not have been doing. And yeah, he's just loving reading. He can't wait to come to the library every week and borrow a new book and take it home, and yeah, he loves it. The program has been fantastic. All of the resources are in there. We love that there's the CD as well, so we can just print off what we need. The cards are already laminated, ready to go, and the books that are part of the program are topical for him as well and grab his interest. So the program itself is so easy to use because we can just grab it when we need, and being his short attention span, we need them to be quick, sharp activities as well. So it's really fun for him to use as well. I've actually got quite a diverse class. I've got quite a variety of needs in my class, and so the Reading Our Way program, though we purchased it just for Jacob, we've been able to use it with a few other students as well who find it difficult to break words down phonetically. So that sight word approach and the repetition of that sight words, those sight words has been really beneficial for those students as well as for Jacob. Being visual learners and taking things in visually, that repetition of those words has just been very beneficial for them. The words at this stage are common sight words, and so they're in Jacob's everyday language. Comprehension-wise, that is the words that he's starting to use a lot more in his speech. We're actually using the program also in conjunction with his speech therapist, and she will focus on the same words that we are looking at for the week or two.
Okay, so just to recap, the teacher isn't just using it for the students with Down syndrome. You could be using it for that 65% of the population who are visual learners. We know of students or schools who are currently doing this, and and I need to say as well that we no longer provide a CD. We've moved with the times, and it's now provided in a different way. So what do we start with? We start with matching a word or picture with another word that is exactly the same, errorless learning. Simultaneously, we're prompting, so speak the name of the word immediately to the student in order to scaffold and build their understanding, such as dog. Can you find the word dog? If it's possible, encourage the student to repeat the name or the word as well. Say the word as much as possible to the student during this phase, repeating the word, modelling to the student and giving it in context. So I would also think about adding the sign for the word to, if the child is using sign in their everyday life. And then we move on to choosing. So choosing one word from a group after hearing the word aloud, such as dog. Learning to associate the spoken word with the written word as a whole, the shape of it, the length of it. Hear it and find it. If the student's having difficulty, limit the number of options available. So start with 2, then as they improve, move on to 4, and so on. The choosing process allows a student to demonstrate that they can read the word without having to say it. It's not essential for them to say it back to you, as long as they can recognise the word. And finally, naming. So students, the student reads the word and says it aloud. And in this phase, they may become, or it may be difficult for some students, especially considering alternatives such as signing if they find it difficult for, in terms of speech, or using picture replacement. And then constant time delay. So give them 3 seconds. So after approximately 3 seconds, if the student has not responded, tell them the word. This encourages the errorless learning, which in turn is allowing the student to feel like their reading is something achievable within their grasp. And the kits. The kits include foundation, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and extension. So we're starting with foundation, and it includes both pictures and words. It's following the matching, choosing, and naming process with the cards, as well as accompanying the activities. It begins with 2 pictures and then builds up to 4, as I said to you earlier, and then moves on to 6. And initially, they're focusing on only the picture. Once the child is confident matching, choosing, and naming the pictures, you can introduce the words. So after mastering the 2 sets in the pack, we recommend that you focus on personally significant words, such as specific toys, books, siblings, pets. We would add in our family grandma and grandpa, and we certainly added in school and hat because they were words that my son was fascinated with or interested in. It's ideal for students who are not yet reading, for young children to familiarise them with the process within the program, and it's never too early or too late to start, as I said in the beginning. So once the student is confident with the foundation pack, you would then move on to set 2, the beginner. Set 3, the intermediate. And then set 4 for advanced. All of these kits focus on the acquisition of high frequency words, their sight words. Each kit progresses in difficulty. Kits are made up of 10 sets. So each set has 6 words. So there's 60 sight words per kit. And the words would have been or have been drawn, I apologise, from Fry, Dolch and 100 most common words lists. With each pack, you would begin with 2, then increase to 4, and then increase to 6, as I said in the beginning. In sets 1 and 2, there are 2 books, one easy and the other difficult. And from set 3 all the way through to set 10, there are no books, because you would focus on topics of interest to the child or the student and the use of books relating to that topic. So, for example, if the student is interested in space, you could then use words related to space. You'd use books with personally significant pictures too, as often as you possibly could. About halfway through the beginning set, you would then introduce phonics. We don't recommend one in particular because you would follow what your school is using, and that could be Jolly Phonics, Reading Eggs, or whatever. Ideally, you would be aiming to use a phonics program that has actions for the sounds so that it's easier for the student to remember. This phase, the beginner, intermediate, and advanced, are ideal for students who have a basic reading ability or students who are working to learn high frequency words. And then finally, the extension kit. So the extension kit focuses on the acquisition of subject-specific vocabulary, those higher order words. It includes 4 sets, numbers 1 to 10, teen numbers, the T numbers, and colours. It encourages the use of personal subject-specific vocabulary drawn from the classroom. So, for example, science words when they're working on a particular topic and need those words to be familiar to the student. So learning about the life cycle of a frog, you would include words that you would be using within that topic. And this is ideal for primary school students to develop reading skills in the areas of maths as well as new theme vocabulary, and high school students who encounter a lot of new subject-specific vocabulary, incorporating that into their sight words so that when the vocabulary is needed, they're more able to read the words. Activities included in the pack. Let's go through them quickly. You can download these via the USB or as a download. The activities could be used as part of your reading groups, small groups, peer activities. You could use them for the same ability or differing ability. The activities include snap, memory, downloadable activities are bingo, fly swap game. So you just need to purchase the fly swaps either from a cheap shop, or you can get those ones with a clear window so that when you hit the word that you can still read it through the window. Frog leap game. Here's a video of one of our students from our CEP class. In the video, she's using Reading Our Way to read the words, match them, and then put them into sentences. She's just finished school.
You want to match some words? Yeah.
Okay.
Can you do good?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I can't block these buses in because sometimes buses
Could
always
you
do
do
that.
way?
I can't change it.
There's no trains here.
Run. Water.
No, I can't change it.
And then
I just don't like buses always.
can
do
you give me a sentence for the word people?
Okay. I have a lot of people as friends.
Good job. Good work. What about water?
Water. I swim in water in the pool.
Cool. And last one, let's do a sentence for run.
I run when I do exercise.
Good work. Good job. That was awesome.
Thanks.
That was really good. You want to match some
I
words?
think it's just lots.
Yeah.
Okay. So additional activities, you can go to www.facebook.com/reading our way. Don't let these limit your possibilities though. I like using Pinterest to spark ideas or find new ideas. And on our Facebook pages, we add ideas or suggestions every Tuesday so that you can incorporate those into your activities that you're already doing. These little videos can also be on our YouTube channel. Incorporate as many additional activities as possible. Look to the students for interest, something that's grabbing their attention. Use that as much as you possibly can. If you can't think of your own or need some ideas, here we have bubble wrap pop. Choose a word and then find it and pop the bubbles. Hopscotch, writing words and into the hopscotch. I like to also do that with squares, and so that they can jump from one to the next if you're looking for something more active. Threading beads using pipe cleaners and thread the beads onto the spell the word. from the paddle pop sticks. Something to remember though, with younger students, the beads would be much bigger to help with the fine motor control. Feel and find bags or I spy bags. You might ordinarily see these with objects, but we've made one with sight words in little wooden blocks. We sealed it with a zip tie so that and cut that so that the beads didn't come out. And then you can take off the zip tie to add in the next words and replace it. Or you could use rice. I think rice is a great idea too. So target practice with Nerf guns, quite a popular activity, one that children will often ask for repeatedly. Building blocks there, building blocks with Lego, a word building activity, which is an errorless game because they can see the word already formed. Sight word bowling, bowl over the word, read the words you've bowled over. Find a word with reusable ice cubes and tweezers. Great fine motor activity if you're looking for something like that. Read it, build it, write the word, build it using the letters, then have a go at writing it down the bottom. Sensory bag with rice, write the words on a piece of card, add it to the bag with rice, and children move the rice around so that they can find the word that they've been given. And the old reliable fishing game. Write the words on a fish shape, add a paper clip, and give the children friendly fishing line to go, a child-friendly fishing line to go with it. So many ideas on Pinterest, and don't forget our little clips that we do on Tuesdays. Thankfully, we're now moving away from withdrawn activities because inclusion is when children are spending the majority of their time in the classroom. So let's have a look at some of those ideas. We also don't want this to be an independent activity. So then how do we add reading our way into what we're doing in the classroom? The research has shown that reading intervention lessons work best in this way. So generally, reading groups are already happening in most primary schools where you work with a small group at a time in rotations. This could be slotted in as one of these activities for the visual learners. Read a familiar book, the book you read in previous group activity, or even all of last week if that's what they need, which is for the lower level, then which is lower than their current ability level. An easy read, which should take about 5 minutes. Then you'd read an instructional book, completing your reading record. Again, about 5 minutes dependent on the group. Moving on to sight words in a game. They can be familiar or unknown words, but if you're doing this with familiar words, be sure to add in some unknown words too. And then when they're ready for this stage, letters, sounds, and phonology, at whatever stage the child is at. It could be just one letter for that lesson or for that week. It's important to revise those skills, particularly for children with an intellectual impairment, because it's likely to take them longer to retain the information. And finally, a shared or guided reading session at the instructional level. So ideally, this would take about 25 to 30 minutes in a session, which slots in perfectly for reading rotations. It needs to be short and sharp bursts to help keep the students' interest. Adding in the new knowledge wherever you can. By keeping the structure the same, it becomes easier to keep the activity running smoothly. So then literacy. We would start with the new word, revise previous words learnt, introduce one new word a day. That's best to choose words related to the class topics or work. Introduce and discuss the new word. So in written, spoken and pictorial form, create a word web of what they know about the word meaning and context for any word that might have multiple meanings, picture sorts, matching words to meaning. On the next page, I have an example of a resource that you could make for those words such as duck or park or glass. And then moving on to expressive language verbally. So putting the word into a sentence, and expressive language written, then perhaps writing the sentence if that's if the student is capable of that. If they're unable to write, you may use a close activity where they have to fill in the correct word, catering for what level they're at. Sentence writing, sentence sort, whatever they need. These activities could again be done in a rotation, either in a mixed ability or same ability. You could use it in peer tutoring activities. Children learn faster if we make learning about their own world. So particularly if you're incorporating their peers into that, isolated students are less likely to engage or retain information. You'll find that they're more likely focused on why they're isolated or what others think of that. Why am I missing out? What am I missing out on? Where you can, make it an activity that is within the classroom. Part of the activity is already going on or planned. So here are those examples that I was talking about. First of all, we've got that word web. And then, oh, sorry, that was a bit quick. The word web, so we've used the word pencil, and we've got the understanding from the student's perspective, perhaps. And then moving on to the words with multiple meanings, so duck, fall, park, and glasses. Here are those examples. Here are some more examples of the sentence writing that you could be doing. So these resources are available from our website. They do come at a small cost. You'll find them in the shop under Education Publications. Currently, we've got them on sale for $7.50 for a pack. You'll also find other packs there too. So have a look at that and see what you can find that would be useful for you. Okay, so the overriding principles. When we're incorporating reading our way as a class activity or in the home, we need to assume competence and set high expectations for the student. If you think that a student can't do something, they're likely to prove us right. So we want them to know that we believe that they can do it, and they'll rise to those expectations. Research shows that when a parent or teacher believes the child is capable of learning, then the child will achieve more. It's such an important factor for learning success. Make learning fun, not looking for sit-down activities where the student must learn. Instead, we're using games, mess, fun. Anything to make it feel like learning isn't the focus, although we know it is. I found that some of my most successful lessons are those when students come away telling people that they got to paint or make a mess. But when you dig a little deeper, you learn that during the activity, they also learned to read their next lot of sight words or whatever they were learning, the learning intention was for that lesson. With that in mind, allow the student to set the pace. If the intention was to learn the next set of words and they got through those with no issues, then move on to the next set. But equally, if you do the activity once and they find it tricky, revisit it at other times so that they can feel accomplished when they do actually learn it. Teach over test. Start with errorless learning for every new set. Establish a familiar routine, model the correct responses, and then move on as they're ready. Sure, moving up to the next reading level is always exciting, but be sure that they know the previous ones first. Less focus on moving up, more focus on understanding the level. Being able to apply their newfound knowledge, building their confidence. That's essentially all the information for Reading Our Way. So let's look at other considerations. Reading Our Way can be purchased using NDIS, either through communication or access, not under education. So look into that if you're considering purchasing the kit. Phonological awareness and phonics. In terms of covering phonological awareness and phonics, we'll look too at reading comprehension, but just to cover some areas that come up when we're looking at reading skills, starting with phonological awareness and phonics. In the early stages of reading, children with Down syndrome find it difficult to use phonological awareness, and that tends to come from difficulties with auditory processing, short-term memory, and weak letter sound correspondence because of their hearing and speech production. The research suggests that when a student with Down syndrome has the reading skills of a typically developing 7 or 8-year-old, they'll begin to use their phonics skills independently to read and to spell like other children. An understanding of phonics is needed to read unfamiliar words. Therefore, we need to teach whole word reading, and phonics. A quick explanation then. Phonological awareness is rhythm, rhyme, and onset. Rhythm, rhyme, and onset and rhyme. Phonemic awareness is isolation, blending, segmentation, and manipulation. And phonics is letter-sound relationships. So traditionally, we're teaching about phonological awareness. We use some of these activities. We use things such as rhythm or syllables, clapping, hopping, or jumping to the sounds in words, rhyming, nonsense rhymes, poems, Dr. Seuss, word families. Students may have difficulty with auditory discrimination, so always have visual supports. Some examples are at, an, op, which is in my picture that I'll share with you in a bit. You can make up real words, nonsense words, blending and digraphs such as cool, dr, or sn, or ch, and segmenting, say it, move it. Practice repeating sounds and segmenting or blending 2 to 3 sound words. The one in the picture is zip that I'll be sharing with you here. Where is my picture? There we go. Stop. Zip. Going from single words to sentences, we could start off with the one sight word, so a in this case, and add a picture to it to make the phrase a pig, a cow. Then adding more sight words to make a sentence. I see a cow. I see a sheep. When the student is ready to move on, then with their writing, you would follow the same process, starting with writing one word, then add 2, and so on. You could use small whiteboards or etch-a-sketches I found is useful for my son, or even an iPad for those activities. It doesn't have to be pencil and paper. And then using those sight words to create a personal book. For example, I can see a, I like. Reading comprehension is an area where we tend to receive lots of questions. Students with Down syndrome often struggle with comprehension, and there tends to be a lag of about 2 grade levels. So emphasize reading for content rather than decoding at the comprehension stage. Looking at the pictures for clues and enjoying reading the book. If we're focusing on comprehension, then the reading part needs to be easy. You wouldn't expect children to need to decode words in the text if the focus was on comprehension. They need to be separate things. So comprehension is fastest and easiest when the child is reading material that is high interest for that person, for themselves. In other words, personal topics. Silent reading might facilitate better comprehension than oral reading due to the emphasis placed on pronunciation rather than meaning in oral reading. The child needs to be able, sorry, I'm not sharing my bits of information here. The child needs to be able to actually read in order for that to happen. Strategies to improve comprehension. So how do we do that then? We define the purpose and capture interest before reading. We make sure that the content is of interest to the child where possible. Utilize that underlying motivator. They want to learn about something. You want them to read. Select texts of relevance and interest to the individual. Ask questions during reading to help make sense of the text. Explicitly teach and model reading comprehension strategies. Model looking back through the book for answers too. Doesn't have to be about memory. That's not what we're assessing or supporting. Explicitly teach, read the sentence 2 to 3 times before asking comprehension questions so that the meaning of the sentences truly sinks in for the student. Use multiple methods of expressing comprehension. So reduce the emphasis on expressive language, matching questions to answers, matching captions to pictures, sequencing pictures, role-playing the story, drawing pictures. Consider the students' vocabulary and language skills. How can we best get them to answer questions to show that they understand the text? Use visual supports as much as possible so that we aren't overloading the auditory short-term memory. And an example of that is on the bottom right-hand corner. Let me see if I can get to it for you. Oh gosh, sorry. The bottom right-hand corner. You could use pictures or words and break them into categories of who, what, when, and where, which demonstrates the student's understanding of the text. And this is a great way to share an easy modification to the curriculum. The child is still able to provide the same outcome, but at a level that is appropriate to them. Handwriting is an area that can be tricky for students with Down syndrome because of their low muscle tone. So we need to consider the use of supports, pencil grips, slope boards, footstools, move and sits, all those sorts of things that you might have seen before. Where you can use the advice of an OT if they're working with one. Make sure that the size of the letters and or the lines are suitable for the student, using a writing implement that's appropriate, such as a triangular pencil or one of large size. Consider engaging alternatives. And other sensory or multi-sensory techniques. So writing with chalk, sand, shaving cream, or using an iPad. So there are apps such as Read Writing or Learn to Write that could help you in those situations. When we're beginning to work on sentence writing activities, encourage the visual opportunities as much as possible. So we're using picture writing, close activities, sentence starters, scrambled words to sort into a sentence, ordering pictures, ordering sentences into a paragraph for older children with a developed understanding of language, independent writing, and allowing that opportunity for success as much as possible and increasing their confidence. Moving on to spelling for visual spatial learners, using visual ways to learn the whole word. Silverman suggests that in spelling we could use a different colour or big letters, use magnetic letters. We could use picture spelling, giving each word a themed picture. We could use rhyming, getting the students to write down as many words that rhyme with their spelling words, games about rhyming, using Twinkle, Sparklebox, Pinterest to get your ideas from. CVC word sorts, Play-Doh, making the words, using that errorless learning as much as possible, writing over the top of the word so that they, because it's already written, maybe using a highlighter, pool noodle sight words, and tactile sight word spelling. Here are the references for anything we used in terms of research or resources. And don't forget to utilise our website. Resources can be found either in the Education Resource Hub or the shop. Our Facebook pages for both Reading Our Way and Down Syndrome Queensland have activities posted every Tuesday. And you can also find any of these as well as previously recorded webinars on our Down Syndrome Queensland YouTube channel. If there are any questions, again, it's support@downsyndromeqld.org.au or our phone number at work there, 3356 6655. Thank you very much for joining me today.